and it's awesome. It's one of the coolest things. It really is. I love what I do, and I love improvising. For that process of flow is magic. Nothing short of it. But what will happen often for me is like, I'll hear this thing. I'm like, dude, that was awesome. I'm awesome. And it's also, bam, I'm out.
Hello and welcome to the Proclamation Podcast. I am your host, Luke Nolan, and I'm here with my guest, brother-in-law, and good friend, Evan Zee. Thanks for being here.
Really glad to be here.
Do you prefer Evan Zee?
Not necessarily.
Ziegenmeyer.
Oh, like my last name?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, publicly, yeah, I do. I thought you just meant like, can I call you Evan Zee? Like,
can I not call you brother or Evan anymore, but just call you Evan Zee?
Call me Evan Zee. Yeah, I like, yeah, Evan Zee is great. Zee.
Yeah.
Easy.
Easy?
Yeah.
Are you easy?
I am easy. At least I like
TMI.
So. Yeah. Not that kind. Well, never mind.
Yeah. Easy to please. Good cup of coffee, warm fire.
I'm easy to
little
be
whiskey.
around.
That's true.
Yeah.
That is probably one of my favorite things about you. We can just hit it off and start talking, and there's no like pomp and circumstance.
Yeah.
Chilling.
Yes. Very easy
What's
to chill.
your earliest memory of us as friends?
That's a great question.
I wasn't planning to ask you that question, but
yeah,
I'm kind of curious.
I think really the earliest true memory of us as friends probably is camping back.
Dang.
So when I went to Metro, maybe when I was 19, and I think I first met you and Natalie at a New Year's Eve party. That was like, I had just started coming to Metro and Metro Open.
Yeah, probably at Seth's house.
Yes. And that next summer, our whole group of friends, we went camping. I remember that one time we went camping on Folsom Lake on the other side of it.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and I feel like
went to see Ranger Parker.
Like that, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like that's like
your
fondest
song
memory.
was on the radio.
That night it dropped on the radio. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So for those of you watching for the first time, Evan is an accomplished musician. And tell us a little bit about your, tell us what's your resume?
Sure.
And then reel it back to how did you get started in music and why is that a passion in your life?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So singer-songwriter is really, if I was to give myself one label, that's probably the primary one I would, at least the one I most connect with.
Sure.
But I have a pretty extensive background in just guitar. I mean, I have a master's in studio jazz guitar.
Wow.
That's literally what it says on my
studio
jazz guitar. Jazz guitar.
Nice.
On my diploma. So I'm certainly a guitar geek. So singer, guitarist. I love writing songs. I'm also a photographer. And I also teach. But I feel like what I most connect, what most inspires me, or what spends the most like real estate in my head, is just the creative process. And my two main outlets for that are obviously music and photography.
Yeah.
But I love the craft. I really love the process of creation and expressing myself. And I guess that's a very...
How do you, because you love creating, how do you balance the temptation to get into creating other stuff? Like you have two kids, you start painting or coloring and you think, man, I like this too. Like, how do you check yourself or put up boundaries for yourself to remember, like, I could dabble in that, but really this is my main focus?
Yeah, I think it's just, I think it's probably a couple things. I think for one, I've been so inspired, particularly by music from such a young age. I feel like I've literally developed pathways in my brain to like, I'm always hearing music, you know?
Wow.
And so it's so continually inspiring for me. And I think also it's like having developed my craft to where I have, it's like what is most exciting to me is like tapping into new ground personally, and the thought of trying to do that in music in general. Just like, what can I do that's new, that is not only uniquely mine or my voice, but it's bringing something new and interesting to the canon of music, you know? I feel like that helps me focus myself rather than, there's certainly other things I would like to do, but I think, well, if I can open more to kind of my thought process is, if I can open up more opportunity and more you know, gain more opportunity, gain more exposure. That's the word. Yeah. Thank you. That I can begin to do the other things that are also in the back of my mind. Like, I'd like to do that one day.
So you kind of
like the main vehicle.
You kind of have a little bit of a Rolodex back there of like, maybe I could get into being a plant guy or
and totally.
Whatever.
I mean, plant guy. I would love to do a podcast myself.
Yeah,
I'd love to do a number of things for sure. But I feel like it's just kind of knowing my particular lane, and I feel like that. Knowing the best chance of me being able to do any of that other stuff would be to stay in my lane for now.
Yeah,
you know,
totally. Yeah, I think it's definitely evidenced, you know, in really successful people that they get more opportunities when they have success, a lot of success in their main lane.
Yeah.
You could just say like acting, you know, someone who becomes a famous actor, all of a sudden they're like, I have a band, you know, or like Nick Offerman has a wood shop.
Yeah.
And super successful. Probably a lot because he's Nick Offerman.
Yeah.
Then he gets Lagavulin whiskey, and it's like, what? You're facing on a whiskey bottle now? You know, and so there's like opportunities that come because he did really well in the one thing.
Yeah.
Or athletes do that a lot, you know?
Yeah. I mean, yes, I think that's exactly right. It's like, if you can, and I think it also, kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, I think it's part of, once you've developed yourself so well inside of one craft, it becomes much easier to transfer, I think, particularly in just creative crafts in general, transfer that kind of a headspace, because you can become familiar with flow state, and you can be familiar with how you learn well. Like, I feel like that's one of the coolest things as a teacher.
I don't think a lot of people know what their learning strength is.
That's actually one of the things as a teacher I feel like is most important in my job.
So you kind of start people with that and work them back?
Well, just teaching them how to learn, you know.
Gotcha.
And so I've really, really worked on like the process of learning something really well and fast. Like, how can I do this fast? Learn fast. And that I think has helped me, like, because I became a photographer later, and I was just naturally interested by it. It's like kind of like the convergence of what you're inspired by, and then knowing how to push yourself continually to get better. And the more I think the more you do that, the more you learn how you learn, and then you can learn things just faster, and then you just build confidence. So I think it makes sense that you can, once you get really great at something, you can begin to get great at other things much faster.
Sort of like learning language. The more languages you learn, the easier the next one comes, especially if they're all Latin based or something.
Yeah, I think kind of at the bottom of it is patterns, you know, and so you get really good at recognizing patterns, and then you can become more aware of like, oh, this like language, I think, is a perfect example, because it's like you recognize, oh, there's a pattern here, and then you can see the patterns in other languages.
Do you ever have a student who you're working with and you're frustrated with their learning ability?
Yes.
And I mean, how do you, is it harder for you to get them over the hump? Like they lose confidence and they want to quit, or is it harder for you to keep your passion going when you're like, man, this person just sucks?
Both. for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel pretty guilty if I let myself
Give up on a
give
student.
up on a student. That being said, because I certainly have a couple of students like that, and I like sometimes you realize like, okay, part of I'm not expecting much from this student, but what can I give to them within this allotted amount of time to bring some value? And I can kind of allow myself to be okay with this person not hitting the goals that they really could be, but it is annoying to me.
They don't practice enough, or
they
maybe just don't have natural ability.
Yeah, the two of them. It's like it is annoying to me. I mean, the most annoying thing is when there's someone who's smart and talented, and really could be great. Could. Yeah, and then they don't. That's really frustrating to me.
I noticed that there was a period in my life when it came to schooling where I was told by a lot of people I was really smart, and so I kind of started coasting on that and stopped accelerating, and I was way too young to start coasting.
Yep.
We should never really be coasting. But I did that, and then I fell behind. And I think a lot of people who have natural ability, they're really good at something. I mean, go back to like athletics as an example. You always have that stereotypical athlete who's just really, really good. They're just way better than the rest of us. Yeah. And so they feel like, I don't need to practice. I don't need to run the lines. I don't need to do the drills because I'm way better than you guys.
Yeah.
But usually at some point, the person who puts their head down and works hard will pass that guy up.
Yeah. And even just the mentality that surrounds or the humility that is involved with having that mindset. It's like you're just going to get farther in life when you have that mindset. Yeah. It's interesting you say that. I grew up knowing I had a high aptitude for music, but
How old were you when you started?
5, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was really young. So
piano, guitar,
violin.
Oh, wow.
So growing up,
glad you got out of that. Just kidding.
I am too, man. I love the guitar.
I got a video I got to show you. Actually, I just saw a guy out in front of Safeway, and he was playing. Remember when we were at your house and Natalie sang "Dilemma" by Nelly? Just if you want to go and take a ride with me with 3 women and the girls and the goatees.
Was this last weekend?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
The guy was playing that on violin with a little speaker plugged in front of Safeway in Lincoln, of all places. And I just thought that was so ridiculous. The next day, this weird. Guy's playing a Nelly song from the 2000s.
Maybe there's a message inside that song that you need to hear.
I don't know. I need to listen to the lyrics again.
That's what my mind would think.
You got out of violin.
So yeah,
you moved on to the big boy instruments.
Yeah, I growing up in our house, my family didn't really listen to music. So the music that we did have, I remember we had this like that
they didn't listen to music.
It's like it was. I guess more accurately, they just weren't interested in. Like for me, when I
didn't go to concerts and
no, didn't go to concerts.
Put the radio on in the car.
I mean, they put the radio on, but like my dad, he listened to talk radio. He didn't listen to music.
He was listening to Rush.
Yeah, quite literally. Yeah, I can still remember Rush's voice. Yeah. So I remember we just had this one. Back when we had those big things of CD portfolios.
Totally. Yeah,
and it was like Christian worship music and classical music.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really into Michael W. Smith, Stephen Curtis Chapman, and classical music. I loved the violin. So I loved, and because that was what I was exposed to. And so I really wanted to learn the violin. So I went to the violin, and I don't remember how many years I played, but it was in 5th grade. I quit. Because I hit puberty in 5th grade, and it was like violin was not cool. And it was the next year in 6th grade that I took. My grandpa gave me this cheap classical guitar that I love. Still, I play it today.
Is this your dad's dad or your mom's dad?
My dad's dad. And I did a group guitar lesson in 6th grade, and I got through the entire book in 2 weeks. And I just ate it up. And it was really from there. It was one of those things where at that time, you know, it was cool to be in sports, and I was good at basketball. I played basketball, but really when I went home, I still practiced basketball, but I was like, I was playing a lot of guitar. And through junior high, it was, you know, it's funny because you're kind of looking for identity through those years. And I really had this identity as a basketball player at that time. And then
you were going to be in the NBA.
I was absolutely going to be a short power forward in the NBA. Yeah, exactly. Well, so I make varsity my freshman year, and it was a terrible experience. They moved me up and I never played. And it just ultimately made me realize I'm doing this because of how it's like a popularity contest for me.
Side note, I think a lot of parents, and if you're a parent and you're listening, take note of this, but a lot of parents are not good at advocating for what's best for their child to build their confidence, but rather what they should do in athletics and academics in order to have stats recognition now. And I think that's super damaging, because one thing my dad did that was awesome is he made me keep going to JV when I was just crushing everybody. And I was like, why am I doing this? You know, maybe we should go varsity. And he's like, no, you need to build your confidence. And he was so right, because when I went up and started getting my butt kicked in varsity, then I was like, I know I'm a champion and I just need to get better.
Yeah.
Because I have the heart of a champion, the mindset of a champion, but I'm getting my ass kicked. So I think a lot of people are like, oh, yeah, go varsity, you know, and then it's like, I never get to play. I never score a basket.
Yeah.
I forget how to be competitive because I'm riding the bench the whole time.
Yes.
And I think parents need to be super aware of that, and something I'm challenging myself to do.
Yeah, I think that is wise, and that would have been wise for me. But in retrospect, at the same time, that was the thing that bad experience my freshman year with basketball, it was like I threw it away.
Drove you closer to music.
And it was the guitar, and that became my identity. And it really,
it
has been to an unhealthy degree since then. I mean, it's like that is just who I am.
So what you're telling me is that your parents were super wise and they did all of that intentionally to drive you to guitar.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe not.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of my early journey with music. And, so like I said, freshman year, it really became my life, and I loved it. It was just so inspiring and intriguing to me. I think I've had many powerful musical experiences where they, you know, it's like those moments that you're like, I need to be a part of this. And I can remember really the most like salient one in my memory is in high school, or it was actually before high school, junior high. I was in choir like through junior high, through high school, through college.
Were you baritone?
Baritone, and then second tenor. Ooh. I wanted to be a tenor so bad, you know. I want those high notes, baby. I remember this being like hearing the older choir sing this Eric Whitacre piece called Luke's Arumqua, I think is the way you say that. It's an amazing piece. And I remember the feeling of it. And I just remember at that time feeling like I need to be a part of whatever this is. Like this, and I think this last year has really reminded me of how special it is to pursue a craft throughout your life, like the way I have, and just pursue something deeply, because it's so sustaining. And music in particular, it's still so mysterious to me. And so because of that, there's just,
the more you unfold, the more you realize you don't know.
There's just continual deep ends, you know. And
it's awesome.
It is. It's awesome. And it's really just, I feel like where I'm at now, like I'm talking about being again, like an instructor, and what I am inspired to inspire is people to just dive into something. Like I think that for me, if like for the parents out there, that I feel like that is my something that is important for me as a parent to hopefully instill in my kids is the love of a craft and diving into something. I think it just helps you appreciate the world in a way that you can't, because once you dive into something deeply and you really, because inevitably that involves a struggle, but it's like the more you develop an awareness of a craft, you can begin to see that in other people's craft as well. And I think, and ultimately that's like an appreciation for beauty and for hard work and for meaning. You know, those are the things that bring life meaning. And I feel like I was telling Natalie this recently that, you know, I think if I can come to the end of life, like it's not the full bank account, it's the full meaning meter. You know, it's like I'm looking for meaning in life.
Totally.
And certainly my craft brings
some of the
so
most
much.
famous people in history died penniless, but we've never forgotten them.
Yeah,
especially artists.
Yeah,
their
like
work wasn't appreciated
Van Gogh's
until later.
Story. That one feels. When I think of like why I'm doing what I'm doing, and those moments where I'm like, I'm not getting paid to dive as deep as I'm diving into this.
I'm not getting paid to be on this podcast.
Yeah, those things. It's ridiculous.
So much time. So little yield.
I just think of stories like that where it's about the love of what you're doing and there's such a journey in the process, you know, and it makes it, there's something of serious value in that regardless of the monetary return.
Yeah.
And I think that it's like a creative endeavor done to the best of your ability is an investment. It's an investment in, because that, like, they're not going to go away. You know, it's like the songs I like the songs I've recorded. It's really exciting to me to think about my generation, you know, my kids, you know, hearing what their great grandfather did. Like that's thrilling to me. And
so say, you know, 100 years from now, those kids are listening to this podcast. What do you want your legacy to be?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's something
Which, by the way, is one of the reasons we started this, because I love making cups of coffee and I think I'm really good at it. But this is not immortal.
Right.
Like, this is gone, depending on the person, in 1 to 60 minutes.
Right.
Their coffee's gone. And so what we do here, I think the most valuable thing that we do here is we build relationships across the counter. So we want to show people how these conversations, we want to immortalize these conversations and show people how valuable that they are to us as baristas, and that we get the opportunity to connect with people super deeply, and nobody sees that because they just have their own interaction with us, and they may feel like, wow, that was a great conversation, but there are so many interactions that happen that affect people very deeply.
Yeah.
And so that's why we wanted to start the Proclamation Podcast, is so that people see that face-to-face conversations and deep human connection is very essential. And now they should be encouraged to do that more if possible, and hopefully get some cues from the way you and I interact with each other of how they can interact with people better.
Yeah. That's great.
And that's what we want our legacy to be.
Yeah.
And that's why we want to immortalize our experience here on the internet, through YouTube, through podcasts, on Spotify, and et cetera.
Yeah.
So say, you know, 100 years from now, they're listening to this and they're saying that, you know, that's my great grandpa.
Yeah.
What's your legacy? What do you want your legacy to be?
Yeah. You know, I don't have that fully figured out, but I feel like one thing that's really important to me isn't I think kind of ultimately, to distill my artistic earnestness is a search for beauty. And so just that kind of ethos towards life of pursuing what is beautiful. And to me, it's like you kind of use beauty and meaning in a kind of synonymous way. I love things that are beautiful. And to me, like beauty is like this, it's a thing that's transcendent, you know, it's the thing that takes you away from where you are. And it inspires us to imagine something greater than where we are right now. And I kind of going back to that idea of like when you do something as deep as you can and you're good at what you do and you've really developed your craft, it's like there's a life inside of that that's beyond you, like even your conscious approach towards it. I was just listening to this podcast 2 days ago. Actually, it was Jordan Peterson's podcast, and he was interviewing the artist who did the illustrations for his new book. Oh, and they were going one by one through the different images for each chapter. Yeah, and they're incredible. It's a great podcast.
I know that it's another 12 rules for life, but what is the title of the book? Do you remember?
Beyond Order.
That sounds exactly right.
That's right.
Okay.
And
Jordan, we want you on the podcast. Just kidding.
That would be awesome.
That would be epic.
So they were going through. He's interviewing her about her process of making the images. Wow. And it was cool to see, like, he would be like, he would ask questions about the image that seemed obvious to him, and she'd be like, oh, I didn't even notice that. And that to me, I love moments like that as a creator, when you recognize, oh, there's a life, again, that life beyond my conscious experience with my own creation, that when it's done deeply and well, there's a story that is received from the person taking that art in. That's not you know. Yeah. The audience is getting something totally different that it speaks to your soul in a very unique way. And the deeper the thing is, I think, for you personally, and the deeper you've put the craft, no, I'm trying to say here, like the more intentional, the more nuanced, the more developed, whatever the piece is, I think that it can tap into deeper places, into the viewer, into the audience.
I have a perfect example of that with your work.
Awesome. That's awesome.
Definitely want to respect this person's privacy, but recently I was with a group of people, and you said, I would like to play a song for you guys that I haven't shared with anyone else. Right. And you played it. And before you played it, you prefaced it by saying, I became a father again this year. I was there. And so you referenced Katie and I, becoming parents. Yeah. And there were other people in our circle, who you referred to, who had recently become parents or become parents again, second, third child. And you just said, I'm covering this song, but I did it in a different way. And basically that it's specifically for the new fathers. Yes. Not knowing that a father in the room had just found out that his wife had lost a child to miscarriage, which was very tragic. And you played that song, and by the end he was weeping. And then we all heard what was going on in his life. Yeah. And we were able to cry together and share that experience of carrying the grief with them. And I don't think that there's any way that you, by yourself, sitting in your studio recording that song, would have realized that you were going to be performing it to somebody who was going through that.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember.
And the impact was enormous to everyone involved because you shared that. Yeah. I don't know if they even would have shared what had happened to them if you hadn't done that, and we wouldn't have been able to carry that with them. Yeah. And continue to do so.
That was a really special moment for me. Going back to, I think it's as an independent artist, you continually question, like, is it worth all this work? And I remember driving
There's
away
a lot of work
from that.
before that performance.
A lot of work for that song in particular. And I remember driving away from that evening and with Natalie, and I remember just saying, if that is the only time that song is ever played, that would be okay.
Worth it.
Like, it really was worth it. And it so reminded me of, like, that's why I'm doing this. And I think, you know, I don't know, I can't totally put into words what that person's experience was, but I know it's like, I know for me, the music that I love brings awareness to things that I can't put into words. And it's like, the music will help surface things. And for me, it's like, I think there's a lot of feelings that you can have, and a lot of different purposes music can have. It's like dance music and music for celebration, music for mourning. I'm most interested in music that's like, how do we work towards transcending things? And so to me, and this, I could be totally wrong. This is just my personal opinion. I think that's like the importance of, the deeper someone is into the process of a craft, like, you're going to get a deeper response again for the listener, and it's going to tap into different areas. And that's the importance of doing things deep and nuanced, you know, whatever it is, not only for the artist himself, but primarily for whoever's
Receiver.
receiving the art. It's like, there's, you know, I think it's just like the same thing. We've been looking at houses and apartments all this last year, and it's like, Natalie and I are so into stuff that's old. And it's like, I think about that, like, why am I so into things that are old, you know?
Well, I want a nice new shiny one.
And I think, I mean, that's certainly a trend right now, right? And it has been a trend for a while, where we're into vintage stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I'd way rather have a guitar from the 60s than one made today, you know? And it's like, why is that? And there's certainly...
It's a very sustainable model, too. If more people were doing that, we wouldn't have to produce so much useless stuff.
Exactly. And it's like, it is such a... Unfortunately, I think it is a testament to how, like, quantity and hitting certain numbers has so gotten in the way of quality. And I think that it is so, I mean, just yesterday I was going to thrift stores, and it's like, I get stoked when I find something that's vintage, and it's just, you can just tell it's made well. And I think that there is, again, it's
heavy.
like, it's got heavy in, like, both meanings of the word, right? It's like, it's made better, and it's like, it's heavy. It's got a weight to, like, the
And I think the only place you find that still now in new products is when individuals are hand making. Like, I think of our friend Victoria Blake.
Yes.
She's making these ceramics, and they're new, but they're made out of something that already existed, which is interesting. She didn't create clay, but they're heavy, they're quality, they take a long time. They're not super profitable compared to the guy who's making 10,000 like this from China.
Right.
But they have a weight. Actually, that was pretty heavy. My hand. But they're quality.
Yeah.
The quality is perceptible. And when you can perceive that quality in a new handmade thing, I think that's also really special.
It is.
But you can't get that typically.
Yeah, I think I think people don't realize how much that actually does affect them. Like, when you're around, I'm beginning to even realize this myself. Like, it's easier to buy the cheaper thing, and it's so accessible. We have Amazon, and it's like, it's cheap. It's gonna be here fast. And I certainly it's not like I don't use Amazon, dude. It's awesome. And I appreciate it. But I also am realizing, the more I surround my stuff with things that mean something to me, like, even in just the stuff I have in my house, the things I buy, the shoes I wear, like, there's a, when you can sense the worth in something, it affects you in a way that you almost can't articulate. You can just feel it. And it's, and I think that's why I'd rather live in an apartment made in the 50s than I would want to live one that was made last 10 years.
Yeah.
There's something that I think we can sense, that things had a different sense of value. You know, there was a value to the process of making things. I think that we've kind of lost.
I think it's also cool to think about. I recently went to an estate sale, and I called you because there was a vintage camera there.
Oh yeah.
And it's a Canon AE1, I believe. Am I right?
You're right.
Okay. I'm just getting into
Nailed it.
Wesley's laughing at me back there. And I was like, I've always wanted to get back into photography because I did it in 4-H. I took some classes and I thought it was great, but I just never took the next step.
Yeah.
And the guy who owned this home and his wife, I'm assuming, they had a lot of stuff. And there was a lot of things that you're looking at as you're walking through their home, and they're all being sold off by strangers. And, the money's just going to get handed to their estate or their family or whatever. But there's a lot of things that seem valuable that are just, $1, whatever. They're just kind of willy-nilly just being sold off. Yeah. And you think about the original purchaser and the value that it had to them and how long it was in their home. Maybe their kids played with it. When I think about this camera, one of the first decisions I had to make after I bought this camera is he's got the little ticker tape with like the raised typewriter. I don't know the proper term for this type of labeling, but it's
like a little label maker.
It's a label maker, but it's like raised,
Yeah, totally.
It's like very quality compared to what we do now.
Yeah, yeah.
The old push the button and it just shoots out a little crappy piece of vinyl paper.
Yeah.
But, it says like B. Johnson or whatever. And one of the first decisions I had to make, because I had this reactionary thing of, I should tear that off. And I was like, nope, I'm never taking that off.
Yeah. Because
now every time I look at this guy's name, I don't know what he looks like. I don't know anything about him. He could have been a serial killer for all I know, but or he could have been the Pope.
Right.
And I know nothing about his life, his morality, his decision makings. Did he have kids? What kind of life did he lead? But every time I look at that, I'm like, somebody took a lot of really meaningful photos on here. Mm-hmm. And there's some photos that have been taken on this camera, and I haven't finished out the roll. So I'm really curious to see, it gets developed if he took some photos that are interesting.
Oh, there's a roll in it that was.
Yeah, that already had cool. A couple. I think it only had like 3 exposures. So we'll see. Maybe it was nothing, but there's a story.
Yes.
And that's another part of what the Proclamation Podcast is about, is like telling stories and hearing about things that we would never hear about that are true, that transcend so much more of the human experience than a fictional story. And if you just spend all of your time consuming entertainment and you don't hear real stories, it's like the difference in watching Marvel movies versus watching documentaries. One, extremely entertaining, and you're just sucked into the next one. And I love them. I love watching Marvel movies.
Marvels. Yeah.
But they're pure entertainment. And then you watch something like Hero Dreams of Sushi. Have you seen that?
No.
Oh, you've got to watch it. It's literally exactly what you're talking about. This guy's been making sushi for like 60 years.
Wow.
Maybe longer than that, actually. I think he's like 90 and he started when he's like 18.
Wow.
Yeah. But he's he's a master.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is super simple. Everything is, like you were saying, for the receiver, but it has to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
They make like the entry level guys make rice for 10 years before they let them start cutting fish. Yeah, it's insane. You got to watch it.
That's awesome.
It's the same guy who produced Chef's Table. This was
those are awesome.
This was like his first, I think, like really big, went viral kind of project.
That's such a great series.
Yeah,
I love the Chef's Table.
It's David Gelb or something like that. Anyways,
yeah, I certainly will check it out.
But when you know like that guy's story, it makes that sushi taste so much better.
Yeah,
and when you know the story behind a product that you're using, it makes you appreciate it more.
Yeah, that story, that was the name of my last EP that I released, and it was really because I think that. This is probably because of my natural artistic bent. To me, that is what I engage with. I want to engage with life as a story, and that whole hero's journey idea. I'm really a believer in that. Believer in that in the sense of I think that's right, but how much I actually interact with life that way is still something I'm pursuing, right? And but I do think it's the way to interact with life, and that's part of why I use story for the name of that record. I think that's something that is lost right now, and going back to, like you said, the story of the whatever is being made. I think that. The way that modern life is, it's so easy. I think even just the language that we use, I think the meaning can be just stripped out of so much of everything. And the more that we interact with things that have a story, I think there's something that it's a reflection back onto to us, like a reminder of like, hey, we're in one too. And if you live your life like it is a story,
that's a nugget right there.
It's so much more exciting. It's like and it's like that, this is certainly, we were talking about Peterson earlier. This is a big part of what he's a proponent of, and has really helped me. And it's like the more that you can, there's something to just when you live life and interact with life with the framework of it being a story, the things that you go through, the suffering, the challenges, it's like you can have a different awareness of them, and they can be tools. They can be these lessons that help develop you further. And it's such a way of sustaining life, and again, in a much more meaningful and exciting way. And so I think about that a lot, and it becomes so much more apparent to me when it's like, for me, it's like the little bit of like expertise I have in that is particularly with music for me. And I'm always trying to, if I'm making a song, it's a story, right? And the more nuanced I can be in telling that story, nuance meaning if I'm producing the song, for me, music is very visual. So, I have the guitar part, the vocals, and then everything I'm adding, it's like, okay, what is the character in this? It's like, okay, the bass, it's going to have this texture and sound. And what's he doing, he or she? I'll personify, like literally when I'm making like the tracks in my. Did you
watch that movie, The Man Who Invented Christmas?
No.
It's a true story, but it's an adaptation of Charles Dickens coming up with the Christmas Carol.
Okay.
And he's trying to flesh out these characters in his mind, and he's walking around in his study, and he was like hella famous already,
right?
But he was out of money because he'd written like 2 or 3 crappy books after his big ones.
Oh, interesting.
And they're like, dude, you got to come out with a book. And so he's like really stressing, but he's got writer's block, and he's just walking back and forth, and he's like, what is this guy's name? Is it scrunchy, scratchy, screwler, and he's like just can't quite get it, and then it clicks, and he's like Scrooge, and he flips around, and they did it really well in the movie. He turns around, and Christopher Plummer's there, and Christopher Plummer plays Scrooge. And so he sees the character all of a sudden now, like he's come to life in my mind.
Yeah.
And then they have this dialogue, and he's like, "You're here," and he's like, "Humbug," you know. And he's all mad and grumpy, and he's like, "Let's write a book," and he's like, "Oh, Christmas! I hate Christmas," you know.
Yeah.
And I think that is, I mean, true artists,
Yes.
they bring to life things that the rest of us just see as notes.
I think that sounds like a really cool scene. There's this, I think it's a Robert Frost quote that always sticks with me. It's essentially saying, "No tears for the writer, no tears for the reader.
Wow.
No surprise for the writer, no surprise for the reader."
Mm.
And I think that is a litmus test in the process. If you're not surprised and moved by what you're doing,
if you're not building that chord progression and you're not excited about it,
yeah,
neither will the listener.
Exactly. And
that's amazing.
It is. And it's such a, I mean, and particularly now for me, it's like I have it's probably a bad habit, but I'll analyze the things I do when after that happens, I'm like, okay, so what does this mean? You know, it's like,
yeah,
what,
maybe that's impossible to figure out.
I think it is.
Yeah.
I mean, I certainly have a personal connection to anything I do and if I'm making something, I want to make it so that I love it. And then it's like, I listen to my own music. I love my music, you know, and if you're not stoked, you're doing it wrong. I have this one student, she is a very successful musician. And it's really a weird thing to be her teacher. Because
you're saying from the outside worldly success,
yes,
she's reached a higher level than you.
Yes.
Crazy.
Yes. And it's really interesting working with her because she just really struggles to even be inspired. And it's like, man, if you're not excited about the process, you are doing it wrong. And I think that it's such a, I don't know exactly what it is for her. I can certainly, there's a handful of things I imagine that it is, but I think in particular, it's the incentives that a lot of artists feel today, the ones that I feel too, of like that. It's kind of like that distinction of creating content, creating art. And we have such an incentive to create content.
You have to create content if you want to stay up with the game.
Right. But the problem with creating content is you're consciously creating for the purpose of content, whereas the intention behind creating, say, art, define art as the intention being the process itself, right? Just the craft. Like I think if the most, however pure you can be in your intentions in the process, I don't know if it's true, but I suspect, and in my own experience, the better the product is, ironically.
Yeah.
Calling it a product is
there is so many examples of that in mainstream music. I mean, people who made it huge because, I think anybody who wants to be inspired should look into some of these stories, because I've been hugely inspired by hearing these stories. And a lot of times it's just on the radio, the DJ will just be like, "Hey, did you know that song was written after their drummer died?" You know, and you're like, "Whoa, dang, like that was an ode to their drummer and they like really smashed it," you know?
Right.
I don't want to ruin the story, but I would encourage people to go look into it. The band Pink Floyd, the story leading up to the release of their album Wish You Were Here is just incredible. REM, Up, I believe is the name of the album. They released it after one of their band members left, and they had made a pact that we were not going to continue the band if any original member decided to leave, but he left because he was diagnosed with terminal cancer, I believe, or terminal illness. And they decided, okay, the spirit of our rule was we don't want to have division in the band. And that's not what happened. So we're going to get a new musician to fill his place, and we're going to continue. And the album is amazing. And I think that there's a lot of stories like that where people had an aha moment, or they had some, like a tragedy dropped on them, and there was a lot of conflict or a lot of period of not creating content, a long drought, and then this huge just flood of rain just hits, and it's just amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, it is that there's unfortunately something to the suffering and the woes of life leading to the best material that you're going to make. I think it just, again, using this student of mine as an example, I think it's like, I know for her, creating and working on songs, it's thinking of it as a product, and it's not a job. It's not deep enough. I just don't think that's a deep enough intention to the process of creation. For, again, it should be first meaningful for you as the creator, and it's gonna, like, just going back to that Robert Frost quote, the more meaningful it is for you, it's going to be more meaningful for the listener or the audience. And anyway, yeah,
I can see that. And I think there's a lot of people that we look up to, especially in our local circles. It's really hard to, people who are in the spotlight, to tell who they actually are underneath.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of people, just like our dads or our, people in influence in our community, local politicians or business owners. And we think we know what makes them tick because of their resume. Mm-hmm. Like I asked you, like, what's your resume? And you're like, I don't really give a fuck about my resume. You're like, that's not who I am. I care about the art. Yeah. But there's a lot of people who we look at them and we say, oh, their resume is coffee shop business owner. And so that's who they are.
Right.
And they really have no idea the person underneath, or, oh, that guy's the mayor, therefore he must be trying to be the president. And it's like, no, he doesn't really care about being the president. He just had 200 people tell him, you need to run for mayor because you have charismatic personality. But really, he just loves being a mechanic. Mm-hmm. And we kind of like put this pressure on people. And maybe that's happened to this student, is like, hey, you have the right look, you have the right voice, you have the right mom and dad, you have the right, you live in the right place.
Yeah.
You should be a famous musician.
Right.
And they're like, I really just love drawing butterflies and, doing kids' coloring books of butterflies.
Yeah.
And they get pulled out of what they have a passion for because they have a talent or a look or a different the world is attracted to them for a different reason than they want the world to be attracted to them.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. And particularly, again, I there's a new vantage point on that point for me as a parent. It's like, it's so interesting how already, I'll see.
Tell us real quick where you're at in your parenting life.
So I have a 1-year-old and I have a 2-year-old. 1-year-old son, 2-year-old daughter.
Amazing.
And my 2-year-old daughter is such a archetypal firstborn, and she's smart and she's funny. And it's interesting how you're as a parent, you're looking for those little clues of, oh, she has this aptitude for this. Already I'm doing that. I'm like, oh, maybe she'll be this. And I just think, oh, I should pump the brakes on that. It's like, because I thinking back on my own journey, there's these, whether it's explicit or implicit, there's people in your life that speak into your life when you're impressionable, and you are kind of receiving definitions of, oh, I'm this person. Oh, I'm this person. And it's really been the last particularly 4 years for me, where you're trying to like, wait, am I that guy?
Mm-hmm.
Am I that guy? And recognizing, I mean, and that's just a part of being an adolescent and a kid, and you're trying to understand yourself, and so you receive the definitions and labels that people put on you. And so, but I do think it's important. I know, and I'm recognizing it's important to really be careful with that with my kids, because I know it's been a journey for me to decouple the wiring that I was given, because of those labels and those definitions of, oh, you're this guy and you do this.
Yeah. But it's possible.
It is possible. I do think it is.
I think people need
hard
to be encouraged and hear that. That's possible.
It certainly is.
You've been told you're
possible.
Stupid, or you've been told you're really smart, or
yeah. And those things I do.
You're
I think
good
they
looking,
get in the way.
You're not.
Just like you were talking about earlier, I thought about this when you were talking about how when someone had said, "Oh, you're smart,"
Mm-hmm.
and then you use that as an excuse or not an excuse, but you began to coast a bit more after you hear
100%.
I was the same way. I knew I had aptitude, for music and creativity, but I never thought of myself as a smart person. And then when I was told that later in life, I began to want to assume that as an identity. And then it made me dumber in the sense of I wanted to come across as smart. And so I began to consciously think of my interactions in a way like, how do I sound smart? How do I sound smart? And I think I've done that a number of times in my life. And it's like, again, I think that's one of the cool things about what I do in the craft of songwriting is like kind of the purpose for me in songwriting is an introspection. And you're trying to get it out in the form of a song so that I can learn about myself better, and hopefully someone can listen to the song and learn about themselves better. Kind of helps them in that same area that I'm processing, right? And so this is certainly something for me that the last 4 years, and in my writing, it's certainly a space for me of like, why do I think this about myself? Is this accurate? And then really you dig into that, and there's something of gold in that, gold in the sense of there's a mystery of, because you can kind of, you can begin to be aware of those things as you listen to yourself more. And like, wait, do I really believe
your
that?
Self-talk. Yeah.
And really paying attention to your self-talk, which again, that's I think a big part of writing songs, which is, that's a cool part of it, is like you have to pay attention to that to really get anything of worth. Anyway, labels and the definitions that other people place on you, they're a really hard thing to combat, but they are a really important thing to combat, and you can overcome them. I think that is, it's really empowering to recognize that. And I actually think that's a lot of the role of great art. That's what it's like. I'm rambling here, but the Grammys are coming up.
You're on a roll.
The Grammys are coming up, and
you're not rambling. You're rolling.
Come on, baby. Let's keep it rolling. So growing up, the Grammys for me was thrilling, right? Particularly when music really became the thing I knew I was going to do. And I saw the Grammys as like, the Olympics
that's
in
the
the
new
way.
NBA.
Yeah, it's like, exactly.
I'm not going to be a basketball player, so now I got to watch Michael Jackson over here getting another award.
Spot on. And it was so
Michael
inspiring.
Jackson was a famous pop star in the 80s to the 2000s.
For all you Gen Zers out there.
Well, you said your great-great-great-grandchild was going to be watching. So
that's true.
They may have forgotten who Michael was.
Oh, I hope they didn't. That's for sure.
No, they'll never forget.
Yeah, he's the best, man.
He was the highest paid. I'm not sure if it's the highest paid. I think he's the highest paid dead person, last year. Dead person, period. It could be the highest paid creator. But I just heard this in the context of Dr. Seuss because of what's going on with him and some of his books being pulled off of Amazon and stuff.
Right.
He was the second highest paid. So whatever, I think it was just dead person, period. Michael was number one in 2020, and Dr. Seuss is number 2.
Wow.
So their estates, which that then begs the question, where's all that money go? Anyways, total sidebar.
So
But
Grammys.
legacy.
Yes, Grammys, legacy, dreams. Growing up, the Grammys were, I don't even know exactly why I was telling the story, but I'll continue telling it and hopefully it'll come back to me. So the Grammys growing up it was like the pedestal at the end of the Olympics. Like, these are the best that we have, and honoring it. And it doesn't really feel that way anymore. You know, it's a different, I'm not as excited about the Grammys because there's so much, I feel like politics involved, unfortunately.
Especially this year.
Yeah, and so it's interesting. I feel like we're in this very interesting time with art, and with the institutions surrounding our art, and it does make me wonder. I think even podcasts, you know, obviously podcasts are the majority of where my ear is.
Yeah,
you know, and I think for the majority of my friends, it's the same thing. As far as like, where are you paying attention to the information that you get? It's like, I'm not reading the paper. I'm listening to podcasts. You don't read the
newspaper?
It's surprising, but no.
Do you watch cable news 4 hours a day?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that we intuitively, we don't trust it as much as we trust people talking, and you can tell when people talk authentically. And so I think that
well, it's sad because I think that there's probably a lot of journalists and people in the media who want to be pure, but they have to be clickbait because they got to make money.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, you know, a lot of people are debating about COVID right now, and hey, are doctors just signing, yes, they died of COVID because they know they're going to get money. And if you were running that hospital, you would say, hey, I got to choose between keeping my nurses and doctors and administrative staff employed or not checking this box. I'm going to check the box.
Right.
Because we're all suffering right now. We're all going through a hard time right now. But this, for me, in my little tiny sphere, is the difference between keeping the doors open and closing down.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people in art, in politics, in you know, just every part of society, they do a lot of things just because they're like, I got to do this to just stay alive.
And that's,
or they feel that they do. Maybe they don't, but
yes,
they feel that they do.
And I think that just goes back to that incentives idea. It's like we have bad incentives right now, and I think
money
and art, art and attention, and it's like, for what we see as we've made attention too valuable, and the wrong kind of attention. It's just like, just your attention is valuable. It's like, well, but what are you attending to? You know, it's like, what is behind the thing that you're actually giving your time and attention to? And I think that's going back to the Grammys thing. And maybe I can't even remember what I was going to say, but I think that we're just building bad incentives for artists right now. And so what I feel, I think part of what my core passions are as an artist, as a teacher and instructor, is the more you can have a love and appreciation for the craft and admire those who are at the top of the craft. And that's why I think the Grammys was something that was so inspiring for me when I was young, because and it was just, you knew it was true. It's like, when the right person got the Grammy, it was the right person as in, this person made something incredible, and it's new and it's groundbreaking.
That's why we all thought, we were kind of on board with how things were going, and then Kanye got up there with like the way that society recognized people for what they did.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And then Kanye got up there and grabbed the microphone and said, you know, great job, Taylor Swift, but Beyonce made one of the best albums ever.
Right.
And imagine if he did that today, after George Floyd, after Black Lives Matter movement took off. People would be like, hey, did she just get this because she's a white girl who put out this great album? Because maybe we need to look at some other artists who didn't get as many clicks or didn't get as many listens or didn't sell as many albums, but their heart and soul. And I think that's where you were going before I got you derailed, is that we're not recognizing people as much for, did this art reflect the truest, deepest part of the artist? and are they proud of it, but rather we're recognizing who made the most money or who got the most recognition, who got the most fame from the work that they put out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's certainly, I don't know what it is entirely. I mean, there's things I assume between it being looking either politically correct or it's, or that it's just like, at this point, we don't trust institutions at all. And
Yeah.
I think of like, even like the Academy Awards, you get the sense like these are just people giving themselves awards because we know it's going to make more money for the movie. And so there's some of that I think going on for the Grammys too. It's like,
but then every once in a while you have like Parasite and everyone's like,
which was amazing.
And
it's not to say that
you guys can't come in here and win.
Totally. I mean, it's not to say that that's unilaterally what's going on. I mean, I think of Jacob Collier.
But it's the exception to the rule.
Yes.
Instead of the rule being, we're going to recognize the best art.
Yes.
Not the best success.
Yeah. 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 I mean, like Jacob Collier, I think is up for best album of the year, and he's a totally independent, crazy talented guy. It's like, that makes sense, dude. Like he's done some amazing work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just, I think it's just the general ethos of art. And again, more so like the intention behind things, I think we've really jacked up our intentions for why we do what we do.
Yeah.
And that's something that is a burning, like, quest for me. Like, how do we help this out?
Totally.
This isn't right.
We do that. We do that with this podcast. People
Yeah.
ask me all the time, is the podcast making money? Is that why we started it? No.
Yeah, I think that question right there, I mean, it is kind of just like,
we make coffee.
is this why we do anything?
We should have done something else with coffee if we wanted to make money.
Right.
We didn't do it to make money.
Yeah.
If it makes money, that's a great byproduct of what we're trying to do.
Right.
We're
We're creating value.
We're not even trying right now. We're just talking to people.
Yeah.
And that just shows a lot about, like, it's sort of like when you meet someone at a party and your society in general, their tendency is to be like, well, what do you do?
Yes.
What's your job?
Thinking the same exact thing. It is the same thing.
Why is that? Why is that the measure of a man?
It's absolutely, you're spot on, dude. And it's something, particularly as an artist or an entrepreneur, you know, this is the same thing. It's like, it's no appreciation for the journey of who someone is, for one, in their career.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, if you can just say, I'm a lawyer, you're like, oof, I sounded good. You know, it's like, that's not interesting at all.
Yeah.
You know, it's
you
like,
could be a terrible lawyer.
right. It's just like, who are you as a human being, you know?
Yeah.
And, yeah, it is. It's just that the incentives we have, we have this view of worth as its value is monetary.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, dude, value comes in a lot of different forms, man. And it's
Totally.
like, again, it's just like starting a podcast. You're bringing value via the stories of other people that hopefully inspire other people, that will inspire someone to do something awesome. You know, incentives.
Yeah. I have a couple more questions for you.
Yes.
So when you were talking earlier, it was blowing my mind because a question that I wrote down for you, that I didn't know if we'd get to, but you like dove into this completely on your own, is how much of your true self comes out in your art that you would never be comfortable revealing to people directly.
Yeah, I feel like that question is a huge part of my journey. I want to be more of that person who's fully authentic in any situation. And if you're doing it right in the artistic process, it is authentic. One of the most interesting litmus tests for me personally,
What does that mean, litmus test?
It's like the scale that, like, a litmus test is like the scale of doing things, like a scale of something is really all it is. It's like the litmus test, like the check mark. The check mark for me doing this correctly, the litmus test for me doing this correctly is improvising. So in the process of improvising, particularly like jazz, when it's like if you're not fully in the moment, you're doing it wrong. And you can hear it. Like, I can hear it now. I can certainly hear it with myself, and I can generally hear it with other people. If I'm listening to them, like, oh, you're not there.
If you're trying to follow a pattern.
Yeah. It's like if you're
right
really
there
in the moment, you're not actually, you become an audience member in the process. And that's what's really cool about when you get to that level in any craft. So in particular, like if I'm really present and I'm improvising, it's like I'm kind of just observing the process happening. And it's awesome. It's one of the coolest things. It really is. I love what I do, and I love improvising. For that process of flow is magic. Nothing short of it. But what will happen often for me is, like, I'll hear this thing. I'm like, dude, that was awesome. I'm awesome. And it's all of a sudden, bam, I'm out. And then I'm playing BS. Yeah. It is, and that is such a, it's a,
how much of it do you attribute to your mind versus your soul?
I don't know exactly. I'm curious about it. I think it certainly is a lack of whatever that, maybe mindfulness is the right word for that. Like I because of an unfortunate short span of my attention, and because I'm a prideful artist, and I get so excited about what I'm doing, and I get in my head about it. I think it's something of the mix between that. I don't know exactly what it is, but I know it when I'm doing it right, and I know it when I'm doing it wrong.
Yeah.
And there's really, my favorite artists are the ones that I can just so tell that they're there. Like, they're there through the whole performance, one of my favorite artists, Madison Cunningham. I remember,
she's awesome.
She's amazing. I remember seeing her.
Got to go to Cornwall, England with her.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That is really cool, actually.
Yeah.
It is amazing how we are that we got to some. I mean, she's. I in my opinion, I think she's going to be an artist that is going to be a generational artist. Like,
wow.
I think she's going to, and I think if she's not, she should be. It's amazing that we've both had interactions with her, like, from a young age, and just being in the same circles,
Yeah.
Anyway, I saw her playing. She kind of became this, like, figure that popped up in LA, like, and it was like all of the top dogs could recognize, like, dude, there's something
Very special.
And so part of that is, like, when she played at this, I forget what the surf shop's called, this little surf shop in Silver Lake. She did this little show, right? This packed little surf shop is super cool, totally LA
intimate
thing, right?
show.
Yeah. And the thing that's most striking about her is, like, she's got this deep musicality, but she's just so in the moment the whole time. And what happens is, it's like, what a great performer will do is, if when they're in the moment, they allow the audience to be in the moment. So you're there with them. It's like, that's really what a great performer is. Whatever your thing is, whatever your archetype is, if you're fully that thing, it's an invitation for the audience to be a participant in that thing. And so that's why it's like, anytime, like, something messes up, it's like you get blown out of a trance as in part of the audience. That's what's so special about artists who are realized to that point, is you kind of get to vicariously live through their performance.
Yeah.
And when it's done to that level, it's like it just brings you to that level as well. And so she has.
They don't rise up into a cloud and perform down, but yet they raise everybody up into the clouds with them.
Yes.
Actually, one of our favorite fellow musicians, Danny Donnelly, told me that it's a dream of his to play down, to be down and all the audience up around him, and to play up to the audience. And he's like, I've never found a place where I could do that, but I'd love to do that someday.
I hope he gets to do that, because
someone might have to build it.
Yeah. I feel like there's got to be some kind of thing like that.
Yeah.
I can certainly imagine that well.
Not just like a stage where the seating rises in front of you, but almost like a gladiator.
Yeah, like a circular
Surrounded.
kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
That would be very cool.
Danny Donnelly, the gladiator,
Yeah,
guitarist.
He certainly is the gladiator guitarist, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, when you said special guest, I was like, I wonder if it's Danny.
That would be dope.
That would be dope. Next time. Anyways, I don't even remember what I was saying.
I got another question for you.
Yeah.
We're in a coffee shop right now.
Mm.
What's your first coffee memory?
Ooh. I don't know, but the first thing that popped in my mind was, and this actually very well may be my first coffee memory. I used to go hunting with my dad. Growing up, and we would leave super early in the morning to go drive to the field,
Yeah. What kind of hunting?
Pheasant hunting, generally. Nice. And it's totally like the, bougie type.
Yeah.
You go out to the field, they've planted the birds,
Yeah.
Yeah. And you've got the dog that's going and pointing. I mean, it's a whole thing. It's cool.
Yeah.
And so we would wake up at like 6, and my dad would make us coffee. And
more for him than for you.
Exactly. Yeah. And it was, I think for him, it was like, there was something very ritualistic about the whole thing. It's like,
yeah,
there's something very manly about going out to hunt. And so there's something, particularly at that age, there's something implicitly like adult or manly about coffee. And so it's part of the whole experience was I got coffee.
Yeah.
Out to hunt, And I remember when I first had it, I was kind of like, it was like the same thing when I first had beer. I'm like, why do people drink this stuff?
Why would anyone consume this?
And then sure enough, here we are. And coffee really is a huge part of my life. I mean, between obviously having a brother-in-law that is heavily involved in coffee, Natalie, your sister, my wife, having worked as a barista for years, we both love it. And I really do see it as a craft. I think what's been cool to kind of vicariously see as someone close to you is, and seeing that it is such a craft. And it's like we were talking about earlier, that to me, like the mark of a craft is something that can be deepened. And it's like coffee is such a great example of that. And in particular, the last 10 years with the rise of third wave coffee.
Going deeper than I ever thought it would.
It's amazing. And I think that is probably one of the coolest things about just American. I see that as a very American thing. It's like, okay, we're going to do this thing. It's like, well, if we're going to do it, like, let's see where we can go with it,
Yeah.
And it's just like we all get to reap the rewards of that. It's a beautiful thing. And I've come to love coffee. I mean, even though now I actually drink it more simple than I ever have, it's like, as long as you have great beans and a good grind, you're set, man. But don't get me wrong.
Don't get too pretentious.
I like me a good latte,
Yeah.
A little vanilla latte once in a blue moon.
Maybe after this podcast.
Yeah, there's a good chance of that now. That sounds good.
So last question for you.
Yeah.
Unless there's any other territory you wanted to cover.
No, I already feel like I talk too much.
Never. So. How has Fourscore impacted your life?
Man, well, I mean, I feel like for me, it's been probably much more than even your average guest, given that our relationship.
Yeah.
I mean, my daughter had her first birthday here.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. And there's been a number of events that we've just had here that's been a part of family and celebration.
That was a big ass birthday for a 1-year-old too.
It was
awesome.
That was a little bit much. I'm hoping that Rhett doesn't look back, because his 1-year birthday compared to hers is.
I thought it was just as good.
Yeah, he got a cooler gift though. So,
what did he get?
We got him one of those there's these tiny little scooters for. He's a baby. He literally got it in tandem with him now, just learning how to walk. That you can.
Is it like a Strider bike?
No, it's similar though. Similar idea. So it's like a scooter bed that has the wheels, and then, off of the handlebars, there's these two different ways that you can situate it, and you can situate it to make what the stem would be that holds the handlebars. You can twist it so it's like, it's up straight generally for a scooter, and then you can twist it and it holds down into a little seat, so he can sit on it and kind of pedal with it.
Oh, that's wild.
And then when he's a little bit taller, stronger legs, flip it back and it just becomes a regular little scooter for him. It's super cool.
They're always coming up with something new.
Yeah, always coming up with something new. So anyway, Fourscore. I think that I just have a special relationship with it because of our unique relationship, and I love this place, and I love. It feels very cool. It's probably the right word, to have a family member own a coffee shop, and not only just a coffee shop, but one that's as serious and I think community minded as this one. I think that's really, when I think of Fourscore, I think that's what I think you've uniquely brought to the table in the landscape of
is community.
Coffee. Yeah, just the importance of community, which this is kind of a little distillation of this podcast, right? The conversational aspect of it. That's something that is absolutely your gift, and I think is a testament to what has developed here. Is you've brought this ethos of a desire to connect with the customer and make them feel a certain way, make them feel heard. And it's like a small cup of coffee helping to facilitate that.
Yeah. That's awesome. I hope we continue to do that exceptionally well.
I'm sure you will, man.
This has been another episode of the Proclamation Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Nolan. Our guest, Evan Ziegenmeyer, also known as Evan Zee. Can people find you on some music streaming platforms? And
yes.
How could they do that?
All of the platforms. And type in Evan Zee, EvanZee.
Okay.
And yeah, they should be on any and all of the platforms.
Definitely worth a long listen. I've had many tears myself listening to your music, and I'm sure that a lot of people will hear the heart and the passion that Evan talked about today on the podcast as they listen to his music. And we appreciate you being here, giving of your time as a dad and a hard worker. It's hard to find time to do stuff like this, so we really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was really my pleasure, and it's really an honor. So thanks.
Thank you for watching and listening. Please like and subscribe, share this with your friends, and please spread the word about the Proclamation Podcast, not just as a platform and not just to help us grow, but to encourage people to have conversations like this. And if you heard something today and you'd like to get in touch with us and talk more, please do that. Please reach out. We want to empower people to have face-to-face conversations with other humans. It's hard to do sometimes. So
take this last year.
Yeah, absolutely. So once again, my name is Luke Nolan. This has been the Proclamation Podcast. Cheers.